Good morning, Chairman.
Good morning, Cheryl. Good morning to all. I hope you're well today. If we can now proceed, please, it being 10 a.m. And I'd like to invite Cheryl to confirm our attendance, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So if members could just confirm they're present when their name is called. Councillor Mrs Rawlins.
Yes.
Councillor Spencer. No. Councillor Coupland.
Present.
Councillor Morn. No. Councillor Parker.
Present.
Councillor Skinner.
Present.
Councillor Stokes.
Present.
Ian Holdenby.
Present.
Andrew Middleton.
Present.
I'll just go back to Councillor Spencer. No. And Councillor Morn. No. Chairman, we've got Councillor Whittington who's observing the meeting today, who's present, and we've also got the following officers present at the meeting. Debbie Bowring, who is the Principal Risk Officer, Michael Butler, who is an Audit Manager from Mazars, Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources, James Drury, Executive Director for Commercial, Rachel Gratrick, Senior Auditor, Sue Maycock, Head of Finance, Corporate, Tony Maycock, Senior Auditor, Lucy Pledge, Head of Internal Audit and Risk Management, John Presley, Audit Manager from Mazars, Amanda Reid, Senior Finance Technician, Alistair Simpson, Principal Auditor, Mark Surridge, Engagement Lead from Mazars, Matthew Waller, Audit Manager, and John Wickens, Assistant Director, IMT and Enterprise Architecture. And I'm Cheryl Evans, and Democratic Services Officer. Thank you, Chairman. I think I need a drink now.
And thank you for that, and welcome to everybody, both our officers and Mark Whittington for joining us this morning, and also our colleagues from Mazars. So welcome to everyone. If I could move on now to item 1, if I could ask Cheryl for any apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't received any apologies for absence, but just a note that Councillor Spencer and also Councillor Morn aren't present. If they do appear during the meeting, I will alert you all, especially for members of the public who will be listening. And I can just see that Councillor Morn has actually just joined the meeting. So could you just confirm you're present, Councillor Morn?
Hello, yes, I'm present.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you, Alex. So we will move on then, and if we can go to item 2, declaration of members' interest. So I'll put it to the members of the committee. Do anybody have any interest to declare? Thank you. I'm going to take that as none. Thank you. Okay, have you noted that, Cheryl?
I have, Chairman. Yes, thank you.
We move to item 3 then, members, please. The minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of February. And I would like to propose that the minutes of the previous meeting on the 8th of February 2021 be confirmed as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please?
Quite happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you, Paul. Could all voting members of the committee to turn on their cameras, please? And if you would raise your hand if you approve. Yeah.
Fine.
We just need to get it back. I'll confirm as soon as it's back,
Okay,
but just bear with me. Chairman, we're now back up on screen, so if Sue could start from the beginning of her item, that would be great.
I will do. Thank you. Thank you. This is an update on the accounts for 2019-20, and the last time the Audit Committee considered the 19-20 accounts, it was back in November of last year, and it's meeting on the 16th. Following this, Mazars raised a query with us concerning our valuation of our energy from waste facility, which you'll be aware is one of our specialised assets. Our following discussions with Mazars, we agreed to obtain a fresh valuation from a specialist firm of valuers who are used to valuing that type of asset. We've now received that new valuation and it's with Mazars undergoing their audit procedures. In paragraph 1.3 of the report, we explain that the valuation difference between the new valuation we've got and the valuation in our accounts is below the materiality level that's set by our auditors. So in the interests of clearing this up and having the accounts approved as quickly as possible, we've decided not to change the value in our accounts. This means that when you receive Mazars' final report on the 2019-20 accounts, it will be described as a non-adjusted error. The audit work is almost complete and we expect that there will be no further adjustments to the accounts, but we're awaiting confirmation of that from Mazars and we hope to receive that early next week. So this report recommends that this committee delegates responsibility for the final pieces of work required to sign off and approve the accounts to the Executive Director of Resources in consultation with the Chairman of the committee. And I can hand over for questions and comments now.
Thank you, Sue. I will pass over to members if any questions to Sue Maycock. We are all familiar with the circumstances of the requirement for this adjustment. Do I have any members wishing to speak?
Yeah.
Alex, I think, and then Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question really about the timeline of events with this. I think the Audit Committee was notified of this discrepancy or potential discrepancy last autumn, perhaps. And I just wonder why it's taken so long, A, to get the valuation in place, and B, why are Mazars taking so long to respond? You know, when did Mazars receive the revised or the updated revaluation? Thank you.
I can answer that. I think we were notified of this by Mazars the week following the Audit Committee, but there were some discussions between the Director of Resources and Mazars, and Michelle was involved as well. And it took a couple of weeks for us to really agree on what we thought the right action was. And then because of the cost of the valuation, we had to actually get 3 competitive quotes. We couldn't just appoint someone directly, so that took a little bit of time. And eventually we appointed the firm just before the Christmas break. So they started work on the valuation at the beginning of January. And this plant has been in operation for 6 years, and the valuers actually had to do quite a lot of work on historical aspects to come up with their valuation. When they sent us the list of questions, it was almost 30 questions, but a lot of the questions had separate bullet points, and there were over 100 lines of inquiry on their list of questions. So it was a big piece of work. It involved staff in my team providing financial information. We had officers in waste services providing information about the history of the plant, but we also had to engage with FCC, the company that run the plant, because they had to provide a lot of technical information as well. So it actually took us the whole of January and February to do the work, and myself and the capital account had weekly meetings with the valuers just to make sure the momentum and delivering information. And during the course of that time, further questions were raised, so we had to get them find out the answers to those questions. So I gave the final valuation to the beginning of this month. So they haven't had it for a great length of time, but they did start working on it immediately.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Any further questions on that, Alex? I can pass over to Rob, please.
No, I think, Sue, thanks for confirming that. Can I just ask then, obviously we can't change what's happened, so going forward as we look to the 2021 accounts, what are we going to do differently, both ourselves and Mazars, to make sure we don't have the same delay?
Okay, yes, yeah, I can take that as well. Obviously, the valuation that we've had refers to the 2019-20 accounts, but the work that's gone on has happened quite recently. And one of the things I've done is I've said to the valuers, have you picked up anything in the course of your audit that would lead you to believe that there might be anything materially different about the value of that plant for the 2021 accounts? And not only did they look at historical information, they've looked at forward plans as well for the plant. And they've answered that as no, they haven't picked up anything. So we've had contact with another county council that also has an energy from waste plant. And coincidentally, they use the same valuers that we've used. And what they've done is they include their plant in their 5-year rolling programme, and in between do an interim review every year to see if a new valuation needs to be done by an expert or whether it can be rolled forward. And we've had access to the kind of review that they do, so that's what we intend to do for this year. And as I said, as indicated by our valuers, I'm not expecting there to be an issue this year end.
Thank you, Sue, for that very comprehensive answer. Thank you. Okay, Alex. Rob, please. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps a very simple question, which I'm trying to get my head around, is if we accept the new valuation of £92.1 million and delete a figure which was less, okay, so we're taking one number out of a set of accounts and putting another number into a set of accounts. Now this may seem the simpleton's approach, so forgive me. Why do we then have a series of actions that are necessary to conclude the report based on the new valuation if it's really only a matter of substitution?
I think one of the reasons we've decided not to amend the accounts is because this is one area of the accounts, but it impacts on a lot of areas. So there are several disclosure notes that cover our property, plant and equipment. So it was actually quite a big task to amend the accounts. And the reason why there's a bit of a time lag now, even when the audit's finished and concluded and they've confirmed all is okay, some of that work is not just about this plant and equipment. Obviously, a period of time has elapsed since the Director of Resources signed off the account. So the auditors need to check that nothing else material has happened in the council that would change other things in the accounts. And we need to support them with their conclusions on that as well. Does that answer the question? Do you need me to say any more?
I think to come in, Sue, if I may, and to look at Rob's question as well in sort of very layman's terms, once we're just one figure on the accounts, it doesn't stop there. It goes into many other pockets as well. So that's why we have the materiality considerations. So going back and reviewing the whole thing in terms of the disclosure notes and everything again is probably left by way of fixing the issue in the current financial period in view of the materiality. Now, but what I think Sue is referring to is that in terms of reviewing the accounts, before they actually formally approved by the auditors has a legal obligation to look at post-balance sheet events. So we've got to ask that question again. So these are sort of legal and quasi-legal and presentational requirements that we've got to observe, but take time.
Okay, if I come back to when this was first mooted, and there was built up, I think, a level of expectation that this would have been sorted. I don't mean that to sound, but did we underestimate the amount of time that it would have taken, because it seems as though that this has been, and I used a sort of ordinary language going on and on and on, but did we expect it to take this long, given all of those ramifications of the assessment of the valuation?
I think that's a fair comment, and I think the honest answer to that is no. We didn't realise that the valuation would involve the level of detailed work that it did, and that it would take that long to complete. So yeah, no. I think Andrew wants to come in here.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Parker. Yeah, well, just to build on what Sue said, and she did refer to it in her initial commentary. Really, is the depth of that work that's gone into getting this valuation. So whilst the audit did what it was supposed to do in terms of flagging a potential issue with the valuation of an asset, and whilst we'd all, I think we'd all wish both us and Mazars that was found earlier in the auditing process and not so late on, and not least after the committee where we discussed the accounts back in November. It is what it is. Clearly, what we've got is a well-valued asset going forward now, and a massively material one as well. But the fact is that I think it was it 100? It might have been 127 key lines of inquiry. When Sue says over 100, it's a massively complex asset with lots of different components on it that require lots of different valuation methods, and they have really gone to town with that. And I guess we didn't necessarily appreciate that at the outset when that issue was first raised on the 19th of November, whenever it was. So learning points for us, naturally, and we'll take those. We apologise to you as a committee that it's taken longer than we thought it does. I think it's right for us to say that as officers, but I think to provide assurance that this asset is well valued now, and in line with what Sue said about what will happen in future years, there'll be a more robust process in place for it. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll turn to Paul and then Andrew Middleton, please, and then Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's hardly a surprise that it is a complex piece of equipment. I am a chartered engineer. I would realise quite the intricacies of putting a valuation on there. We are very fortunate it's gone up rather than down. It could have been a lot worse. I mean, this thing is working hard every day, and it doesn't take a lot of work to actually spoil somebody's day. So I think what's important, the work's gone in, and we know what it's valued at the moment. So that means we can go onwards. Thank you.
I think to come back to the actual valuation was 6.7 million less, not more, wasn't it?
Apologies.
No, it's okay.
It is. I can say I did sit in on the meeting between the plant manager and the valuers, and what was really clear was that FCC are replacing the assets as they wear out with high quality assets, and they're actually improving the efficiency of the operation of the plant, and it's operating at a higher capacity than the capacity it was built to operate at. So I think the outcomes have been quite positive.
Yes, that's good. So, and just as one sort of technical question before we move on to Andrew and Ian, I mean, the asset was put in the accounts originally at its base cost. Has it been revalued since 2014?
It has. Well, we were depreciating that asset every year, so the value was going down. But what Mazars did was query the basis of the valuation, and the valuation we've had now has approached it in a quite different way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Paul. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. I think the challenges and the assurances have been good. It's an audit committee doing what it should. My question is, are there any other assets of material value which will need revaluing? I don't want us to be in this position next year. No,
this is the only highly specialised engineering asset that we've got, and all of our other property, plant and equipment assets are valued by Kier, which is the contracted service that we have for a lot of our property work. And this was the only one that was picked out by Mazars as having a particular issue. And this was one that wasn't valued by Kier. We were having it valued by a specialist engineering firm. I don't think that's an issue for this year end at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sue. Ian, that's you. Thank you. I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's all right. Thank you, Chair. In a rare moment, I'm actually going to be supporting Andrew as opposed to challenging him in this one. As an accountant, the whole issue about valuation and properties has been a very interesting one, certainly for the last 12 to 18 months, full stop. I'm also on the Lincolnshire Police and Crime Commissioner Audit Committee, and they again also have specialist building properties. It's a very difficult challenge, and a lot of the valuers are struggling to say what does it mean in terms of in use, the basis of valuation, and all the accounting that goes alongside it. So it is not a quick exercise, and let's say with the best will and hindsight, fantastic. But I think this has actually been done relatively quickly based on what it is. So I'm actually quite supportive of how well they've turned this around. The one bit I would just look to understand is it is important, given the current environment, that we understand the triggers where the valuation assumptions might change. So it's less about the number. I'm kind of happy with the treatment. And again, the dependencies washing it through the accounts I'm with you on that one. I have that nightmare on a regular basis. But it's identifying the radar stations for the things that might cause the valuation assumptions to fail and or be materially changed. Sue, you mentioned the fact that actually efficiencies are going up. Have we got from the review those key points so we can take Andrew's point, we don't have a repeat, but actually we don't have another jolt one way or the other next time, so we can spot it happening?
I have an overview of that, but we haven't got that in detail at the minute. Although, as I said, we do have that contact with the other county council where they've given us a kind of an outline of how they do their annual review. But when I looked at that, it was clearly in conjunction with FCC, the company that run the plant, because we need to understand whether the operation of the plant has changed and whether, what that kind of impact is. And it was... a lot of time on this over the last couple of months, and I've seen what the valuers have done, and I've they kind of explained their approach as they went along so that we understood it. So I know what they've done is they've looked at all of the expenditure, and for example they looked at key items of expenditure, and then when they had the meeting with FCC they wanted to know what was that expenditure for. Was it a planned piece of replacement of equipment, or was it because something had gone wrong? And what was the thing that went wrong? I mean, there wasn't anything that had gone wrong. It was all planned, as it turned out. But I kind of know the kind of questions that we need to ask. We haven't articulated that on paper yet, but that's something we'll be doing over the next couple of weeks, really, for this year-end process.
Thank you.
Absolutely, we can reference to those questions when we look at the next set of accounts. The guide is on the right. What lines of inquiry we ought to make.
Okay, yes.
Thank you. Is everyone any further questions, members? Sue? Thank you, Sue, and thank you to Andrew Cookham, because that was very helpful, and thank you for everyone's responses. So we will I will now move to the recommendation, which I'm going to propose as noted in the paper. The committee delegates to the Executive Director of Resources, in consultation with the committee chair and myself, responsibility for 1, considering the audit completion reports of the external auditor regarding the audit work on the self-assessment on the statement of accounts of 1920. And secondly, approving and signing the letters of representation on behalf of the council to enable the audit opinion to be issued following the report of the external auditor. And thirdly, to approve the audited statement of accounts for 1920. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you.
I'm happy to second that. Or Paul.
Thank you. Whichever. Thank you both. Okay. So if we could move to the vote, and if you are in favour of recommendations, please raise your hands, and then we'll Thank you.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we've got that one then been dealt with as regards item 4. Yeah, thank you to everyone. If we could move to the external audit strategy for 2021, pages 15 to 52. And again, I will turn to Sue Maycock to present the report, and obviously then we'll look to representatives from Mazars as well who we have attending today. So I'll hand over to Sue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief so that you can make the most of Mazars' time here. This is the audit strategy memorandum, and this one just covers the main accounts, not the pension fund account. That will come to a later committee. And the only thing I didn't mention in the report that I'd like to say is that we have recently had a training session that Mazars put on for all of the finance staff, and that highlighted the key areas in terms of their approach to the audit, and we found that very useful. So at this point, I'll hand over to Mazars to talk you through it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Certainly. So good morning to you all. I will take the report as read, but there's certain aspects that I really want to bring to your attention as a committee that will also reflect on some of the conversations you've had already and some of the other papers that are in here. I think it's useful to get that context. The first area I just want to draw your attention to is page 23 of your pack, which is section 2, talks about the engagement team for 2020-21. As part of our reflections of the prior year, we do this each year as we reflect on what worked well, what didn't work well, what could we do better. We think about the aspects of the accounts, and we also have to adhere by independence regulations. Mike Norman, who was the audit manager for the 1920 audit year, has been replaced by Michael Butler, who's with us today. Mike has reached the tenure of his term under the independence rules, and therefore we have to make a change. Michael has been brought in. What we've also done is we've taken the opportunity to segregate the teams between the pension fund audit and the council audit. That enabled us to put a stronger team together to really focus on what are essentially, from our perspective, two entirely different sets of accounts, two different conclusions that we have to reach. And that allows us to strengthen the resources that sit around that. John Presley, who's here with you, is going to be the manager on that client. John's got previous experience with pension fund audits. He also is the auditor for the Derbyshire Pension Fund. So that enables us to bring together that sector expertise in a stronger way. If I could then take you to page 27 of our pack, which talks about the audit scope, approach and timeline. Members will be aware that not just for yourselves, but a large number of local authorities still have their opinions for 1920 outstanding. For this financial year, we have agreed a timeline with management that will see us complete the opinion, barring any unforeseen circumstances, by September of this year. We don't think that will apply universally across the sector. But again, part of our strengthening of the team, reflection of what worked well and what didn't work so well last year, means we've put in place the resources, as well as tackling some of the matters, for example, the valuation of land of buildings, much earlier on in the process to make this a more streamlined and deliverable audit. The next area I'd like to take you to is page 30 of the pack. 30 of the pack sets out the significant financial statement risks as we see them for 2020-21. Now, broadly, these are similar to last year, but with a difference, which really reflects the changing environment of COVID-19. If I just take you through them briefly. Item 1 is the management override of controls. That is an audit risk that is prevailing in every single audit, corporate or public. It just reflects something that we are mandated to do. It is the same audit risk as the previous year. Items 2 and 3 reflect on the two largest areas in the financial statements in your balance sheet, that being the pension liability and also the land and buildings. They are, again, significant risks because they involve the use of significant judgments, estimates, as well as experts that are involved in that process. We will deploy our own experts this year to support our work. Item 4 is expenditure recognition. Under the auditing standards, we're required to assess that there is a mandated risk around revenue recognition. In the public sector, there is a requirement to us to consider whether that risk also appears in expenditure. What we have done is we've considered the underlying factors and arrangements, and we have completely rebutted the risk that management may materially overstate revenue by fraud. But for our purposes, and this is not inconsistent with other local authorities. It is not something that we think is specific to Lincolnshire County Council. But from a professional skepticism and independence perspective, we are going to perform some additional testing around the cut-off of expenditure. That is to say, ensuring that it is recorded in the correct financial year. The last risk is a new risk for this year, and it reflects the fact that the authority, along with the rest of the country, has received a significant number of grant funding in relation to COVID-19. There are judgments that management will need to make over how to account for those grants and also how much to recognise in year. And because of that level of judgment and because they are new, we think it's appropriate to spend some audit time looking at them. The last area that I'm going to pick up is section 5 on the value for money conclusion, which is page 37 of your pack. Members will be aware that the Code of Audit Practice has substantially changed for this year. It is resetting the basis of the value for money conclusion, where we'll be commenting. We are required to perform sufficient work to understand the arrangements you have in place, to assess whether there are any weaknesses that require further review, and to comment in all regards across these 3 areas of what's termed proper arrangements. They involve financial sustainability, so how the authority plans and manages its resources. It involves governance, how you make informed decisions. There are also specific requirements over how we view you as an audit committee. And lastly, it involves how you as an authority use your information about cost and performance to improve the way you deliver your services. It is a much, much broader assessment than previously. It requires significant additional work from ourselves. And I will also say that management have been very helpful in helping us develop a response to a self-assessment. So that is working very effectively for us. The last pieces I will reflect on is merely to comment that once again we've reviewed our independence and we're satisfied that we remain independent and objective and able to perform the work for this year. And at that point, I will stop and just take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. I'm looking for the members for any questions for Mark at this stage. Andrew Middleton. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the part of the VFM audit that intrigues me most is the efficiency, effectiveness and economy, the third one. How much will you make use of comparator data from comparable authorities in coming to that judgment?
Thank you for your question, Chair. We'll come at this from 2 aspects. One is we perform a risk assessment by using established benchmarks that are already available. For example, There are some VFM profiles that are available in the public domain. There are also other profiles available, for example, the SIPFA Financial Toolkit. What we are looking at, though, is we are looking at how you as an authority use benchmarks, whether you use them or not, and how you develop those and what you use them for more than what we do.
Thank you. That might send significant messages to the finance team on this meeting.
Thank you. Further questions, members, please, for Mark. Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, just two quick questions. Just on the fees piece, the £7,000 on the overrun for the 1920, is that's still the cab clock is still ticking on that one? Is that explicitly due to the conversations we've just had earlier on this?
Certainly. So in the previous year, if I explain our fees, they come in three tranches. So the £7,000 itself is one-off. We've fixed that now. That's closed, and it relates to aspects around the valuation of the specialist waste treatment.
It's entirely down to that.
Plus COVID, additional costs that arose because of COVID. So in the 1920 accounts, you have material valuation uncertainty on your plant and equipment and the pension funds. It affects the work that we do on the in terms of our audit reporting.
Yeah.
So it's all encompassing of everything.
That's fine. The second question, please, is the wording's very nicely put around the £10,000, that it's going to be at least £10,000. That feels like an open checkbook at the best of times. In terms of getting a semblance of how much more it's likely to be, in terms of how developed your thinking is at this stage, because I never like being the first one through the gate, because you tend to have quite a lot of costs compared to everybody else and do a lot of the learning for everybody else. Where are we with that? Because 10 grand is quite a significant proportion. You know, 12 or 13% of the base audit fee excluding pensions. That's a lot of thinking time by a lot of very expensive people.
Absolutely. So the fee proposal we've put around value for money conclusion, we've applied consistently across all of our 80 local authorities based on our reading and understanding of the guidance notes that have come out on the work that we need to do. Unfortunately, those guidance notes only just finished being released, and that's why we're behind the curve in understanding. Well, we can't give a fixed amount because we're still expecting one more guidance note to come out, and so we can't confirm until that comes through exactly how much work we need to do. We've taken the view that it'd be appropriate to disclose this up front because this new conclusion requires a significant amount of my time, the senior time that goes into this, more than inexperienced time of junior members. So it is our best estimate at this point in time. What we expect the final guidance note to come through this month, after which we will have a more definitive idea of what the outcome is. We're also in discussions with the other providers, so not just Mazars clients, but through with the National Audit Office and other suppliers, to ensure that we remain consistent and fair when it comes to this work.
Okay, because unfortunately, having spent many years working with the National Audit Office, of no matter what you do, there's no such thing as value for money. I'll be intrigued to see where that ends up. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, please. Thank you.
So was that me? Sorry.
That's you, yes.
Yeah, fine, thank you. I want to ask a question about value for money in an ordinary sense to see how our external auditors monitor it. Quite often, not just in Lincolnshire, but in lots of local authorities, big highway schemes tend to cost more than was originally planned. Once the work has started and it's committed, then we have a problem because we have to almost follow whatever happens, and we keep going, and the amounts can accumulate to a point. Now, when we then retrospectively analyse from an audit point of view value for money, how do we square that on-run of increased cost in relation to a value for money assessment. So it's not just about Lincolnshire and our two big schemes that we've had recently that have overrun, but in a general sense, I'm interested in knowing how you make an assessment on value for money retrospectively when the costs have been so much higher than were anticipated in the first place.
So we come at this from a perspective of understanding what controls and procedures are already in place. So, for example, if I speak generically, because that's the easiest way to answer this, we expect local authorities to develop a capital programme, and as part of that capital programme, where there may be a significant material item, it will go through a bidding process, and then the costs are monitored on an ongoing basis. And those are the arrangements that are really important to have a look at, because as with everything, things change. If you take the last 12 months with COVID, I don't know any capital programs where the ongoing schemes of the costs have increased because the additional costs of labour costs, because you can't have everybody on site in one go. So for us, it's about the transparency that sits around that if there is a clear and understandable story to tell, that's what we want to understand. From experience, where we found issues in capital programs and in this area is if the particular projects have overspent by such an amount and they've come as a total surprise, and it uncovers the fact that there was information that was available when the budget was initially set, that's when that's where we may consider carrying out further work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mark? Members? Perhaps I could just ask one thing, Mark. In terms of your additional work on expenditure recognition and general cut-off, you said there was a renewed emphasis on that this year throughout all councils. Could you just give us a bit of a background of the importance of that and any change in tone?
So some of my local authorities, we've carried out this work in previous years. Where we've come at this for this year is that because as an authority, most of the income has reduced and been replaced by the additional grants, which don't count as revenue. Typically, it's a technical piece, but they're not actually revenue. Yeah. We look at the individual expenditure streams, and because non-pay is actually a material amount of expenditure that runs through your accounts, and in a COVID environment, there's just increasing challenges around the finance team, and therefore we've just felt it's appropriate that we have a look at kind of the non-pay expenditure, perform some additional testing both pre and post year end, just to ensure that everything is running through into the correct financial period. We did do this we have done this in previous years with Lincolnshire County Council, and there have been no issues arising. But it is something that carries through into this year.
Mm-hmm. Those grants in terms of the revenue and expenditure recognition you've been talking about, they will be sort of quite highlighted at quite a high level in the accounts, I presume, when we're looking at the 2021 figures.
Yeah, you should certainly be able to see the COVID-19 grants in the accounts. Our expectation is there would be there is already an existing disclosure note for it. Yeah, and we'd expect something in the there'll be a note that's called the judgments note, where management will say these are the judgments we've made over these grants.
Would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, we've been talking to Mazars about this anyway, and we have got a handle on what we need to do with COVID grants. We also think that both the COVID grants and the expenditure will be exceptional this year. They're not something that are normally in the accounts. And when I go through the later report on accounting policies, I'll be mentioning materiality as being one of the key issues, and they will be material. So they're going to need to be highlighted in the accounts, both the income and the expenditure side of it. So that's what we're planning to do.
Thank you, Sue. That's very helpful. Thank you. So obviously that'll inform members when we come to look at the accounts in June time, when they've actually been drafted for the audit committee's attention, etc. So thank you to you both. Any further questions for Mark and his colleagues? Any questions on the pension accounts for concerned? Obviously, I know there's the same issues, but obviously we've looked at that at the pensions committee as well. Okay, thank you. So we have the proposal is that we note the report, and obviously we've delved into cut-off issues and related items. Andrew, did you want to come into something before?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I'm very tardy here, but I've been thinking about Councillor Parker's challenge, and I don't know the size of the overspend on the road programmes, but when one's considering value for money, will the auditors be looking at whether or not there were clauses in the contract that may have mitigated potential overruns and or risk shared any overruns?
To be honest, that's a level of detail that we might not even get to. It's becoming a bit speculative at this point. The only answer I can give is it depends. Unfortunately, that's without any specific examples. It's too difficult to answer.
Okay.
Okay, so are we happy to note the report and the details, explanations, and etc. we've discussed? And if we're all in agreement, that I can confirm that we note the report. Okay. So if we move on to item 6, pages 53 to 66, and again we're back to Sue. There we go. To present the report, and again with our colleagues from SARS, and then we'll address members' questions following that. So over to you, Sue.
Okay, thank you. This is a report on external audit quality, and it looks at 2 recent reviews into that topic, basically external audit of local authorities, and it highlights some of the key findings. The report's for noting, but we brought this to you because we think you'll be interested in the findings of these reports. The background to this is that the external audit of local authorities' statutory accounts, and indeed company statutory accounts, has been under the spotlight for some time in recent times. And some of that will be about some of the financial resilience issues that some local authorities have experienced. And this committee did do some work with Overview and Scrutiny Management Board some time ago on financial resilience as a response to some of that. The 2 reviews we've reported on have got outputs that are particularly interesting. The first one is the Redmond review, which was conducted by Sir Tony Redmond, and was about the oversight of local audit and also the transparency of local authorities' financial reporting. And the key recommendations about external audit quality are shown in paragraph 1.7 on page 54. And the government has accepted all of these recommendations, apart from the first one, which was about creating a new body to manage and oversee local audit. And the government has said that it wants to explore other options first. But in terms of the other 4, if I just go through paragraph 1.8 with you, the government have accepted the recommendation that audit fees be increased. And I think the background to this is that they have been reducing quite significantly in recent years, and audit firms have been struggling with the lower fees in various aspects. The government's pledged £15 million of additional funding across the sector to cover those additional costs. It's also been accepted that the deadline for publication of audited accounts be extended, as this will help to mitigate against some of the quality issues. But the government have only agreed to do that for 2 years, and I'll give you more information on the deadlines when I present the next report. The government's committed to working with accounting bodies and the Financial Reporting Council to look at the uptake of local audit training, and it's agreed to work with relevant bodies on strengthening engagement between internal and external audit. So all of those areas will be of interest to you. And I'd also like to point out paragraph 1.11, which is on page 55. These recommendations aren't to do with external audit quality, but they'll still be of interest, I think. Recommendations, these are all supported by the government and likely to be implemented in due course. The first one is that an annual report be submitted by the external auditor to full council in the future. The second one is that authorities give consideration to the appointment of at least one independent member to the audit committee who's suitably qualified. And then lastly, that a standardised statement of service information and costs be published alongside the statement of accounts, which sets out a comparison between the accounts and the budgetary position. And the government will be working with representatives from the sector to try and develop such a statement. So that's the Redmond review. And then the second review was the Financial Reporting Council report on audit quality inspection. And this was published last year. And basically, the Financial Reporting Council looked at the quality of major local audits by the 7 largest audit firms auditing in the public sector. Findings were very positive about the quality of the value for money conclusion work. However, when reviewing the audit work on financial statements, the council felt that some improvements needed to be made. And Mazars was one of the firms that was deemed to be needing to make improvements. And Mazars have responded to those findings by the FRC, and we've included their full response at Appendix B for you to look at. So overall, we conclude that this is positive work, and we hope that some of the recommendations, once implemented, will help audit firms to resolve some of the issues that they've had in recent years. In Appendix A, we've included some more information about the consultation on audit fees that's happened recently. So basically, there's been a flurry of consultations responding to some of the Redmond Review recommendations. So we've had the consultations on extending the deadlines and also on the audit fees, and we've responded to all of those. There is a financial impact for us, and you'll have seen that on the last item when the strategy memorandum included the costs. We haven't included additional monies in the budget for this as yet. At the time we prepared the budget, we didn't know what the costs would be, but the government has said that it will cover those additional costs next year with this extra £15 million. When we made our consultation response, we did ask for assurances that longer term funding would be in place because this is likely to be a permanent increase in costs. So they're the key points. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Sue, this audit committee, I believe, is very much a self-critical committee that uses self-assessment and self-evaluation exercises to ensure we are effective and up to date. But what is your judgment in the light of what Redmond said or any other report content, that whether or not we have a major gap to fill? Obviously, we've got 2 additional appointed independent members, so that's double banking there. I thought every authority had them, but I presume not the case. Is there any major gap that you think would imply that when we next review our effectiveness as a committee, we need to fill?
That's interesting you should ask that, because Lucy and I have been working on the value for money self-assessment that Mark Surrey's referred to in the last report, and there is a section in that about audit committees, and we think all the answers are very positive. I don't know if Lucy or Andrew might want to come in here as well, but personally I think we're in a fairly good place.
Lucy, would you like to respond? Andrew?
I'm getting there. I think I've arrived.
So you're okay. We're waiting. You're fine.
Yeah, I think I arrived. Yes, we have, and we have got the self-assessment, and we will be looking to do that again this year. So there has been some new governance guidance that's come out recently that we will be looking at again. But overall, I think this is a well-established committee that has had independent members it as part of its makeup for a long time, and that does bring that different perspective and challenge. And we do have that self-assessment against good practice. So yes, we did assess it as effective, and also you do give an account to the full council through your annual report, and that is one of the key things about an effective committee, is that you give an accountability of the work and impact that you've done to the council and how you've discharged your role and the value you've added through the governance framework of the council.
But we could always learn more, couldn't we? We're not complacent.
Every day's a school day.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Lucy, and probably the colleagues from the ZARs might like to respond about the annual report to the council from the external auditor. I think that's a very positive move. I don't know what other members would think. Ian's nodding. Yeah, I think it would be another line of assurance for the rest of the council as well. So again, along with the AGS statement, we're working a sort of no surprises sort of environment. Okay, Ian, you're indicating you would wish to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I'm just going to put a warning sign up on 1.7, the fourth bullet point. Internal audit work can be used as a key support to external audit work where appropriate. It always has been available. That's been a mandated standard for a very long time. My concern is where people start trying to use it as a substitute, and the reliance external audit and the hoops and the levels and the kind of bars they have to go over to demonstrate that they can. You don't want this to be a way of reducing it without actually having the assurance that does this. And at the same time, what you don't want is internal audit resource being diverted to do what an external auditor would normally be doing as well, because you lose the whole benefit and the skill sets of having the internal audit team you've got. So I think everything else, I've seen, I fully understand. I know direction of travel. It's been quite difficult trying to retain and attract people into that area to provide this quality of service that we're looking for. And it's not really much of a shocker. But I just say, I just providing counsel on that one, that we make sure we don't do anything silly with a view to try and use that overlap, because it should already be there anyway if they could use it.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Do you want to make any comments, Sue? Nodding.
Just agreeing with that, yes.
Just agreeing with Ian, yes, that's good. Do I have any further comments from members of the committee? I can't see anyone. Cheryl, am I missing anyone? I don't think I am.
No, that's right, Chairman.
Sorry?
I said that's right, Chairman. There's nobody wishing to speak.
That's lovely, thank you. Just revert to my own notes. So on that basis, perhaps we could, I could propose that we note the report. Thank you. And I'm assuming everybody's happy with that. Anything to the contrary? Thank you, members, and thank you to everyone for the very informative responses. Okay, so if we could then move to 7, statement of accounts, and Sue, it's you again.
This is my last one, Chairman.
No, we'd love to hear from you, absolutely. But thank you for your forbearance. So if I can hand over to you once again, thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is the report we bring to you every year, asking you to approve the accounting policies that we intend to use in the forthcoming statement of accounts that we're starting to work on now, and for both the main accounts and for the pension fund accounts. There are also some items to note as well. The report refers to the accounts and audit regulations, and as I mentioned in the previous item, there have been some changes to the timescales, and these are temporary changes for 2 years, and the government wants to review them. But essentially, the deadline for publishing draft unaudited accounts, that's been extended to on or before the 1st of August. It was the 31st of May. And the deadline for publishing the audited accounts has been extended from the 31st of July to the 30th of September. And we plan to present our draft accounts to this committee in the July meeting. And we've already engaged with Ian Fifield to provide you with some training before you look at the accounts. The report then sets out the main changes to the Code of Practice, and these are shown on page 68. they're fairly minor. We don't think any of them will present us with any particular issues. And you'll note in the final bullet point on 1.2a that the leasing standard has again been deferred, so won't be applicable for this statement of accounts that we're starting to work on now. We've reviewed the code of practice and we've made changes to our accounting policies. They're shown in full in the 2 appendices, and the changes are all highlighted. And the key changes are shown on page 70. We've just pulled out what the main ones were, but they're not major changes, any of them. So I'll stop there and just invite any questions on this report.
Questions from members? I'm just looking. Anyone got any questions at this stage for Sue? Could I address one, Sue, if that's okay? It's about the IFRS 16 on the leasing standard. Is this going to involve an awful lot of extra work, like other? Yeah, and when do we need to be starting doing it?
It already has started because we thought this was going to be implemented before. Now this is the second time it's been deferred, and it does involve a lot of work, yes. And my team had already started on that, and we've done a significant amount of work. But I have to tell you that with the advent of COVID and all the additional work we've had to do on that, it has been put on hold. But we do need to start picking this up again in the new financial year so that we are ready for it. So yes.
Broadly, Sue, can you just give us an idea of what that would involve, or what, broad brush explanation of what that's going to mean to us in terms of the account?
Yeah, we've essentially got to assess all of our existing leases, and sometimes that isn't straightforward because sometimes a lease isn't called a lease. It's a lease that's embedded into a different type of contract.
Yeah.
So we're reviewing contracts. We're reviewing leases across the council. This involves schools as well, so you can imagine that that's quite a lot of work. And we're basically looking at the elements of those leases to see how we need to treat them in the future. There'll be exceptions to the standard, some kind of de minimis points. So if leases are below a certain value, we can carry on treating them as operating leases, which means that they're shown in our revenue expenditure. But largely, we expect a lot of our leases will move onto the balance sheet. That won't have an impact on the council's budgetary position, but there will be some changes to the way we have to account for it. So those changes will feed through into the statement of accounts. It'll have some potential impact on some of our prudential indicators.
On how we count our council tax contribution, will it? Will it be an accounting issue? It'll be outside of that.
It is an accounting issue outside of that. So no, not budgetary impacts. It will have some treasury impacts, and some of our prudential indicators might need to change. I know this committee doesn't look at that, but the Scrutiny Management Board will need to be made aware of that. So it is quite a big thing, and like I say, we have already started.
That's lovely. So do you think members we could do a bit of training on this one when we get near it and ask the right questions, or just does that include that training and something else? But it's quite a complex issue because we're in other words, we're restating assets instead of whacking them through the revenue account. They'll be coming back onto the balance sheet, and that'll have revenue account implications that will then be reversed for the council tax and all sorts of things. But then, where we usually put them won't be the same place, will it?
No, that's right. And I think when you do your scrutiny of the statement of accounts, you'll need to have a level of understanding that will enable you to do that scrutiny effectively. So I think you're right. We need to think about how we do that and put that in place for you. So we'll take that away and have a think about it.
If you could, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Because I think that's again, we have to probably just ask you as we're going along how we're going along with that in terms of timings and everything. So obviously, that's a large chunk of work when you're involved in the schools as well, because the responses from third parties may be a bit sluggish, one suspects, sometimes for all sorts of reasons. Okay, thank you. Who do I have with the hand up? Andrew, Ian. Who was first? Ian. Okay, thank you. Then Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So having just implemented IFRS 16 last year on my group accounts, I say you're absolutely right. The council it takes you about 3 times as long as you think it's going to take, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff lingering around. You almost have to consider things like the threshold test. You have multifunction devices. What do you want to constitute remaining? It is hard work, and trying to find them is hard work, and it's a trawling exercise. valuing is also quite difficult as well. And coming up with a methodology, not only just to collect it once, but to maintain it and to spot additions during the year is quite challenging. So my only counsel on this is this hairstyle comes from trying to implement IFRS. Just be careful. It's not a quick job. And actually, when you think you've got it all, double check, because it is really hard.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
So, Sue, just picking up on Ian's point there, in view of the time it's going to take, does your department need some more resource to, in other words, are you going to have someone who's pretty dedicated to doing this, or a couple of people?
Chair, could I just,
yeah.
Sorry, say it's as well as actually having the people tracking, actually a lot of it is actually the people going hunting down and finding the paperwork and having the communication. So actually the resource strain is on both sides. It becomes quite, it's when you start having to interrupt the business as well, and where's that information stored, especially if you've got pockets of controlled documentation in certain pockets, finding out it's there, hunting it down, trying to check back through the P&L about where spend has been, trying to find the leases. So finance is fine, and having your sniffer dogs is good. But actually, there's also the implications on the business as well for them to go and get it, especially if they're not in the office and the paperwork is sat in the office.
Okay, we'll have a look at the resources issue, and we can obviously speak to Andrew Crookham about that.
Okay, Andrew Crookham, would you like to say anything on that regard?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, only that I take my Section 151 responsibilities very seriously, and part of that is ensuring that the finance team have got the right resources to do the job. So no, nothing other than that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you both. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Ian. Andrew Middleton, I think, Andrew, you wanted to ask your question, did you not?
No question, Chair. I'm fully sure that they've got a grip of it.
That's wonderful, thank you. And just turning to our colleagues at Mazars, I mean, are you giving any additional time in your planning in the 2021-22 accounts preparation to look at that?
Thanks, Chair. I'll take that because I think Mark's had to slip away, unfortunately. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, in terms of IAS 16, yeah, once we get the 2021 audit out the way, what we will start to do from planning all the way through to our planning interim and finals, we'll start to have those conversations up front and work with Sue and the team to sort of establish the process behind identifying these leases, you know, the steps that obviously SITFA and the council have to go through, and then we'll start putting that piece of work together. But we'll have those conversations from the offset. Yeah,
that's good. So your team, will be again no surprises about what you expect from them, and last minute issues. So that's good. Thank you. Okay. Do I have any further questions, Rob?
And also recognising that we are moving from one council to another council. Mm-hmm. We have our next meeting on the 14th of June, and I take your point about training, because it seems to me that the normal induction programme will need to embrace not just what is audit, etc., but some pretty detailed stuff before we move to the 14th of June meeting. Now, we could discuss it one of the items, item 12, but I just wonder what sort of change the senior officers feel is necessary for us to embrace it, let alone people who are coming to it as a new member of the audit committee start from scratch, which may be easier because they don't have any predisposition. So I wanted to pick up on your point and extend it a bit about training.
Sue, perhaps Lucy, you could come in with this.
Certainly, I think in terms of the leasing, I think my team needs to take that away and have a think about what's appropriate for you. I don't know if Lucy wants to comment on the wider training issue for the committee.
I think Cheryl's got her hand up, has she?
Yes, or yes, she has, yes.
Or is it? Let me see.
It's Councillor Skinner that's got his hand
sorry,
up.
sorry,
No,
I can't see.
it's all right.
Yes, sorry. So yes, we have got an induction, a general induction, but we're looking to arrange some training for the audit committee itself, and then also for the accounts. They've arranged to sit for Ian Fifield to come in again to do some training. So if there's any particular things that you feel would be helpful for awareness, it would be good if members, having gone through the training before, or things that you feel that you wanted a bit more explanation on, to share that with Sue and myself. And we can make sure we shape that up. So there's a provisional date in the diary in May, after the arrangements have been made, and to set up the committees. So it's looking to have a couple of hours as an introduction via a Teams training session, and then again just before the committee in July for the accounts, interpreting the accounts, etc.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. I think going back to Rob's point as well, perhaps we could address that at the end of the work programme as well, just looking at what we, those requirements for the induction day, and also the fact that we may have new members, and we're going to be some of us may not be here. So who knows what the committee is going to be like then, and also the viability of or the efficiency of doing that on Teams, and if we need more than one session. Okay. Andrew.
Therefore, Chair, would it be prudent for us to pencil in the afternoon of the 14th of June?
Well, we've got I don't know. I can't comment, Andrew, because we'll have the elections before then, so we'll have to wait and see who's back. I think Lucy, you've got a provisional date in for the 26th, I believe, haven't you, of May?
Yeah, I think they are looking to invite the independent members, because they look at. I'm just seeking advice on the tenure and the time, how to work that in the new processes. But if you could book the date that's provisionally booked in, Ian and Andrew, but the rest have to wait till after the council's approved the committee structures.
So what time on the 26th, please?
Hold on a moment.
I don't know at this stage, but probably morning. Lucy will tell you that.
Just I'll email you I've got the Wheel of Doom on my Outlook.
Yeah, thank you.
Just going back.
Lucy, okay. I can have a look. It's 10 o'clock start on the 26th of May.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Still 12:30. Thank you.
Okay. And Lucy, just we're just looking at the independent members' tenures as well, aren't we?
Yes.
Votes, yeah.
Hopefully Ian and Andrew are content to continue on the committee, so we're just formalising that request to you guys. But hopefully you've enjoyed your stay. It's been a couple of years, so hopefully you'll be willing to continue.
Enjoyed it immensely, and yes, willing.
Exactly the same.
Wonderful. That's good. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, so have we any further questions on the
yes, Chairman. From my point of view, Lucy's just actually mentioned the magic word, process, right? Process and systems. In order to capture this data, instead of making it hard, maybe we've got to go back to basics in certain areas, because we need to decide what that data is, where it is, and how we're going to capture it as part of the work process, rather than it being a forever hunt. So that's the regards to training. Really welcome it. Should we be lucky enough to have to do it? And yes, it's been a pleasure working with our independent members. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. I have every confidence there won't be that many changes.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you once again. Okay, well, we then have the, I'm going to propose the following, so I'll read out the proposals, okay? That the first proposal being that the changes required to the Statement of Accounts and the Code of Practice 2021 be noted. Secondly, the potential for the deadline for publication of the audited Statement of Accounts for 2021 be amended to 30th September 2021, and for the deadline for publication of the draft on audited accounts be amended to on or before the first working day of August 2021. We note that. And item 3, that the Statement of Accounting Policies Appendix A be used in preparing the council's accounts for the financial year ending the 31st of March 2021. With those. And finally, that the Statement of Accounting Policies Appendix B be used in preparing the local government pension scheme fund accounts for the financial year 31st of March 2021, and that those are approved. So could I have a seconder, please? Can I have a seconder, please? Yes, I've got a hand up. Who's that? Thank you, Paul.
I'm quite happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. And so if members could turn on the cameras, please, and indicate if they are happy with those proposals. We'll see if that's unanimous or not. Everyone?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So we will confirm that that the proposals 1 to 4 are formally approved. Thank you. So, members, if we can then move to the internal audit progress report, item 8, pages 109 to 152, and I think we've got Alistair and Matthew with us, and we will at some stage we've got John and James attending as well. So you could just invite Lucy, Lucy to present the report, please. I think that's where we are.
Oh, sorry, Chair. It's Alistair. I'm presenting.
I do apologise. Sorry, I do apologise. I'll hand over to Alistair. Thank you, Alistair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, morning, everyone. So this is just to update you with the headlines coming out of the progress report. So we have got 2 limited assurance audits identified, which are ICT, network, infrastructure security, and ICT, business continuity and disaster recovery. We have, as the Chair mentioned, we have the Assistant Director for IMT, Enterprise Architecture, here to answer any questions and updates on those 2 pieces of work. We've also identified 2 high assurance audits and 2 substantial assurance audits, and we also finalised the combined assurance report during the last few months. We continue to make good progress on completion of the plan. As stated previously, COVID-19 and staff capacity has impacted on us with a number of sickness absences and an inability, unfortunately, to recruit to the vacant posts we have, just basically due to lack of people available to do that. The focus is on growing our own through apprentices in 21-22, and we have also gone out to back out to recruitment just to see if we can pick some up as hopefully we move to the end of the lockdown, which might get a few more people interested. All our audits in the plan have been allocated, and we are looking to complete the plan, aiming to complete that by the end of April 2021. In terms of the tracker, 75% of the recommendations we picked up by the audit tracker were actioned, with just 11% of those actually not yet due, which leaves 14% which have been deferred, which were due. The reasoning for a lot of those has been the impact of COVID-19, unfortunately for those. And I think of those 14%, there was 1 limited assurance audit with 2 outstanding high-risk actions, which was cybersecurity, and those 2 have been deferred to 2022 and 2024 due to the fact that I think they're moving towards Microsoft Azure, which is a cloud-based architecture. So that's the reasoning for that. In terms of business world, we are continuing to support the process and also the testing process around that. continue to provide assurance around that deliverability. In terms of, I think, access to the system has been highlighted by external audit, and we're looking to do a starters, movers and levers audit in Q1 to sort of pick up on those points. In terms of the transformation programme, again, continue to provide input and challenge to the governance arrangement for that. The first highlight report has been drafted, and again, we can share that information going forward. And welcome any questions.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you. Okay. If we could, yeah, I'm just looking at members. I mean, is John Wickens? Is John with us at the moment?
Yes, I'm here, Chairman.
Would you? We'll have the members' questions, John, and perhaps you could come back to us on the specific points when members have raised their issues. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Andrew Middleton, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Lucy might not be so warm towards me, given her earlier comments after this challenge, but I'll say it anyway. There seems to be a not irregular theme of not being able to get the staff. Very difficult to attract appropriately qualified people. Now, you're doing mitigation actions. You are going to increase apprenticeship rates. My personal urging to you would be, whatever you're thinking of, I'd double it, because there is wastage amongst trainees, but they're not that expensive, and very often you get more for your investment than you thought you might have done. You are using contracted people, but I don't know what the cost of those is compared to a salaried payroll person. It may be more, and therefore that's why I understand why you're doing it at the moment. You could, of course, reduce the internal audit programme, but you'd have to sell that to us, and we'd have to consider our risk appetite in that context. Or you might look at the skill sets you've got across the whole financial realm. And I've highlighted on one particular area which intrigued me no end. You've got 748 days of counter-fraud activity planned, if I read it correctly. By way of comparison, the third largest clinical commissioning group in the country is spending 60 days on counter-fraud. Now, I know they're different. It's apples and pears, but people fiddle health spend just as much as they might fiddle local authority spend. So is there an untapped resource with similar skill sets that you might mine from the counter-fraud team to assist you with your audit work?
Thank you. So, no, thank you. I welcome the challenge. I think that's a key element of your role, to hold myself to account. It's part of my statutory role to ensure that there's an effective internal audit. I think we've been quite transparent that this year's been difficult, and that the impact on both delivery and the staff through the COVID and the various lockdowns has impacted on the staff. I think overall, when we went out, I think Alistair mentioned that we had some candidates that were coming for interview at the beginning of January, and we went straight into lockdown. Those candidates dropped out because they couldn't really feel that they were ready for interviewing. So we have made the transitional arrangements to recruit through external suppliers and agency staff, which is the short-term sort of resource gap, and we are going out for recruitment again in April. So hopefully the market will be more buoyant for experienced, and we are looking to recruit apprenticeships, but we do have to work within the council's affordability framework. And I will be working with Andrew and Michelle to look at the future of the service, to have that flexibility and sustainability. It has been an unusual year this year. The service itself has had a significantly more sickness absence. That has been not the norm for the service. So the well-being of the staff and the impact of the change and the environment has affected the staff sickness levels within the team. So I feel that the mitigating actions, as you say, that we put in place are addressing the issues that we've raised and the risks that are rising. What we are looking to do is do the talent management. On your latter point, we do work very closely with the Counter 4 team. So it is a one service, one team culture. They're both under my remit as the head of service for audit and risk. So they do collaborate and do joint working together. But again, whilst it's 745 days, that does include investigations, and there's been a spike in fraud. So it is a balance. And when you have an investigative fraud, it was to split those two disciplines so that the fraud investigations that affect conduct and public purse wasn't impacting on the delivery of the audit plan. But there is very much a collaborative working, and we do pool resources as we go through, and we look at those during the year. So the team is planning to work together on contracts, particularly around procurement. So we do try and pull those resources, but we've got to focus on where the fraud is as well. So we do that collaboration. I'm confident that I will be able to provide my head of internal audit opinion for this year, but I haven't sort of when I reviewed and talked to the team about the report. We've been quite transparent about the problems that we faced through the recruitment. So this is the third time we're going out. I will be looking at the resources for both the teams with Andrew and Michelle going forward in terms of looking at a co-source model. So that will be a combination of directly employed staff and some trusted suppliers and a pool of relief. So again, this last year has had an impact on our ability to recruit in those streams. So, but overall, even that all said, the team's done a sterling job in delivering the amount of audits and the work and the added value over the year. So I'm still quite, and hopefully the committee can see that they've still delivered some really focused work on the things that matter to the council. So yeah, in summing up, it has been a bumpy year. I've never worked in local government for over 30 years. I've never experienced anything like it. I think the team has responded well. They've worked very collaboratively with both risk and with the Counter 4 team to make the best use of resources this year.
Thank you, Lucy. That's very assuring. And of course, we know how well apprenticeships can work out, don't we?
We do, yes.
And if I may, Chair, whilst I've got the floor, it's a suggestion. Elsewhere, there's mention of a carers follow-up. Because, of course, the impact of COVID and all sorts of issues on adult social care teams is potentially, and children's care teams is potentially very major. Just to advise you that East Riding of Yorkshire has done a specific piece of work on the well-being of the care workforce. I can't share it with you because I've seen it in a confidential nature, but I suspect that John Skidmore, the Director of Adult and Community Services in East Yorkshire, would be prepared to share it if you ask nicely and you have a relationship. It has got some very useful suggestions of how to maintain the well-being of adult care staff.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm sure Lucy's the Thank you, Lucy. And we do, I mean, all the team here are very supportive and really appreciate the hard work all your team have put in under, very unusual and trying circumstances, Lucy. I mean, it's very hard. The whole process is, I mean, you need, not having any hands-on is quite very difficult, I'm sure. But I don't know if you'd like to comment on that.
Yes, it has. But we also what the team, obviously Matt and Emma, our new team leaders, have taken steps to strengthen performance and performance reporting, help to get better track of progress and delivery in a remote working, as well as supporting the staff through. So they've strengthened and tightened the performance framework so we can keep track of work, and also in terms of the KPIs and timescales. So not only are we supporting the staff through this current environment, we're also strengthening our audit processes as well.
At least one presumes in future, along with the rest of the councils, we're going to be looking at the way this may impact on the internal audits work in the future, and how we're going to organise that effectively.
Yes,
there's been. Any of us anticipate we're all going to be going back to what we did this time last year in 5 minutes, or it's not going to have a fundamental effect on how everybody works effectively?
No, I think that there's been a staff survey, so a lot relies on the council's digital strategy. IT is obviously key in terms of remote working, and we've also done a home working survey with our staff to get their feedback on where we can make things better and what's working well for them. So we look to get that at the end of the month. Again, always looking to see how we can improve and support staff going forward.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm looking for questions from other members. I have any hands up, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, it's about the limited assurance, the business continuity and disaster recovery. I'm interested in particular about page 144, where the heading is audits with limited or low assurance, and this is limited confidence that we've got. And I'm interested in the response, which I can partly understand, that the last paragraph says in relation to IMT have no plans to put into more stringent DLP technology, as the business has not supported these technologies and would not commission them. Therefore, the council is in effect accepting that risk, relying instead on the knowledge and judgment of staff. I just wonder to what extent we feel that's an acceptable assessment in relation to some of the things that we're talking about, which essentially is about business continuity and disaster recovery. I know that the whole question of IT has been to OSMB as well as it's here today for audit, and we have had discussions at that, and John's been really helpful. But that point about the council is in effect accepting the risk rather than the technologies and the commissioning of them, it just seems to me to be something that I'd welcome a little more information about.
Thank you, Rob. John, perhaps you could come in and respond to Rob's question, please. Thank you.
Yes, data leakage prevention technologies are often sold to organisations, and in my experience, many programs are often lead to a position where then the organisation sort of decommissions or turns off those technologies. And the reason for that is that they are highly constraining on staff. So we're talking about technologies that look at the things that people are doing and enforce policies extremely stringently, taking away any flexibility that staff might have in terms of, for instance, attaching certain types of data within an email. It would scan that attachment. Any mention of any of the trigger subjects would mean that attachment would be stripped away and that email would not go in its intended form. And it might be where people try and share data with external organisations and find that they're blocked from doing so. And it takes judgment out of the hands of the officers and places it and places technical constraints in their way. And it is a matter of policy, not technical judgment, as to whether these technologies are appropriate and can be tuned appropriately to achieve the sort of business effect one is looking for. We have never proposed these kinds of technologies as part of our footprint, because the behaviours we see, the quality of the training we give staff, and the general awareness of information assurance matters. The good awareness of the GDPR, the General Data Protection Rules. Yes, of course, human mistakes are made, but technical constraints would seem a very crude sledgehammer to try and stop those occasions where human error occurs. And also the other truism, and this is based on my sort of observed experience in the past where I've seen other organisations adopt these technologies, is you can have a perverse outcome whereby you stop the obvious ways of doing things and people find ways around those constraints. And very often they use personal email addresses, they will use cloud services to circumvent your controls. And because those planes of communication are not monitored in a corporate sense, there is no audit trail, in a way you actually find yourself perversely in a worse position than had you not invoked those technologies. So it's just a judgment call, Councillor Parker, really.
Okay, well, can I ask the question then? Is there, I don't like the word conflict particularly, conflict between in our audit world and our IT world, because if it's being said here that the audit has come up with a limited or low assurance, is it the view of audit on the one hand that perhaps this would be a good idea, and if IMT are rejecting it, then we've got that impasse where into the future audits will always have a view that this is limited or low assurance, because that doesn't seem a tenable argument between audit and IT if the two worlds are not in some sort of relationship that can be mutually satisfactory, because we could expect, therefore, if that position is taken in perpetuity, that audit will continue to report in this vein.
It's not a key finding. It was an advisory. And so it wasn't sort of a principal dimension in the limited assurance, which was referring to more serious and generally accepted matters. So,
okay.
Bob, any further questions to John on? No. Just perhaps come in there, John. Are we? I mean, the systems that we use and we have commissioned, do they come with these controls attached, or do they not? Or so are there add-ons, or are they things that potentially we have to start off with and then we take off the system?
Historically, they were add-on technologies, so we would have, at additional cost, we would have procured those technologies. In fact, some of that capability is inherently available within Office 365 at a low level. So we could do, we have some DLP type options available in Office 365, and as that migration completes, information assurance would look at those and make advice to the senior information risk owner and seek an opinion as to whether, you know, at a corporate level, we would want to invoke those sort of configurations and constraints. But the more sophisticated constraints, particularly content analysis, tends to be sort of plus cost.
Yeah. So are we looking at the type of software, for instance, that the social media providers would use to take out offensive content, those sort of filters that would pick up keywords and those sort of things?
That's correct. Yeah, that is one form of content policing. Technically speaking, that's less about leakage, which tends to imply it's corporate data leaving the organisation. But you're quite right. You know, it's another form of technical constraint, and typically you get some of that sort of, as I say, free of charge in the service, because all corporates want to control to some extent the sentiment and language used in internal social business social platforms and Teams chats and areas like that.
So when, for instance, people are trying to send an attachment to some of those sort of issues, does our system prompt them not to send it unless those attachments? I mean, clearly, from a member's point of view, we're prompted before we send an email to say, are we going to encrypt it or not, for instance? I mean, are those prompts on people sending attachments, say, for instance, if they're sending spreadsheets or something, that they actually have a password on before they can be opened at the other end?
No, there's no such system configured at the moment.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I have Andrew, please. Thank you.
No, Ian first, Chair.
Thank you. Ian first. Sorry, I can't see all the pictures. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew. I'm probably with Andrew that Lucy may regret saying that sentence. Do you want me and Andrew to continue when I start with this bit? I have to admit, on page 143, I'm really disappointed with the response because from the management's perspective, because there's a number of aspects there that make me really quite concerned. There's elements I'm not going to pull my punches. Basically, it feels like there's a lot of finger pointing. It's accumulated over a period of time. The response times are in terms of years. And I suppose I've got three observations. One is the fact that actually I'd like to understand how the executive are cited in terms of the risk profile of the things that are not being remediated at this point of time and the flight path. Therefore, what is the quantifiable risk of the gaps? The second thing is in terms of, and I'm hoping that the new holistic view from the business process and the overarching transformation program picks this up. But I have seen, in my limited time here, the transformation program seem to be rolling on, that it's the source point. It is human behavior. And to be fair to John, I understand that where people don't notify of levers and everything else, there's no connectivity. But it does seem to be pointing the feel out, well, we can't do anything about it. So there is that challenge that says, it really needs to be, how do we shut that down? And the third thing really is how we've, whilst we have a program of identifying what's going to be rolling out of service over 12 months, if we have got a whole bunch of other stuff and it's complex, our risk management framework in terms of spotting this, if we've got to this point and we're now fixing it, about making it front and center. So I have to admit that 2 pages, one page 143 and 144 on the report, that could be the nature of where I work and what I've experienced over the time. It's really worrying for me, because there just seems to be this, we'll get to it and fix every period of time. I appreciate it's complex, but as I say, that's probably the most unnerved I've been on any of the reports that I've seen in my time here.
Yes, and it's trying to address a number of points with very different natures. I take, for instance, the point on the starters, movers, levers process. And indeed, for some time, it's certainly not intended to be a finger-pointing exercise rather than an opportunity spotted, because any process needs a trigger, of course, and that trigger comes from the people managing the staff who are leaving or joining, and you need an end-to-end process that informs a number of platforms and systems, some of which we are the key stakeholder, and others which sit elsewhere, like the enterprise resource planning system. And there has never been a convincing process service design that really answered the problem in a convincing way, and it's joined together with sort of things that the managers should do, but if they don't do, it's not spotted that they haven't happened. And so what we're hoping to do is working, the transformation program creates an ideal venue where we can get the right engagement with business, and so we can create a single trigger point, a single point of origin, which is always the most reliable sort of design of a process of this nature, and then we can automate all the things that need to happen in those scenarios. So,
John, sorry to interrupt, but say I've done this a couple of times on different industries. You're absolutely right. Frankly, the easiest trigger point is pay, because managers don't want their costs to come out of their pay accounts, and the fact isn't there are budgets. The answer is HR, when people leave, are the first, as you say, the single point of origin and truth. At that point, that is a communication out to, do we know who owns the systems? Your job is to shut them down. You don't need to over-engineer it. But the answer is you're right. But the trigger point is managers tend not to fill in forms or with they've overpaid. I'm completely with you on that one. But HR will know when somebody's left because we stop paying them. A report out to the individual. It doesn't need to be over-engineered in the first instance. My concern is the rapidity, John, if I'm honest, because there's things that we need to do. If we've got out of service, out of support systems, which are vulnerabilities to this department, we've seen so many hack attacks on so many things over a number of years. Trying to do a really gold-plated solution, I think, is we need to run this in parallel. Something like that can be done quite quickly, and that's why I want to see that the executive and also the council are cited on the we need to do something now, and then this is the slightly longer-term burn. And you're right, a better solution would be great, but we need to do something now. Sorry to interrupt your answer, though.
Well, there's two points you make there. So first, on the starters leavers process, whilst it's true that the payroll sees paid employees, we have the principal problem we had when we tried to do it that way is that we have many hundreds of contractors, and they are not entered into the ERP system, which is counterintuitive but true. And we campaigned to the Business World programme, and it is in their plans that if you are a human resource being put to work inside the council, that you clearly need to be in the enterprise resource planning system. And if we make that happen, then at that point, Business World could become that single trigger point. So it's a technical point, but it is, it is quite difficult to start when there is no trusted source of data at the present, and that is the reality at the moment. On the second point, the timelines that you referred to, those longer timelines, are related to two things. The auditors made a point slightly to one side. I mean, a risk area where they were talking about monitoring and fault detection on network assets. They make the point about network segregation. And that is, it's a bit of a stretch of scope, but it's a perfectly appropriate point for them to make. And indeed, whilst I'm on that subject, we do find the current ICT ordering, very helpful and very informed, and greatly improved on where it's been in previous years. And the point they're making, though, is that's an architectural change, highly risky and disruptive work. And that explains the quite long timelines on that work. So the large investments we made on the campus last year, we've done the groundwork, and now what we've got to do is start to adjust the networks without sort of disrupting the organisation at an unacceptable level to arrive at that point of a segregated network. And that will be quite a long programme of work. So the starters, movers, leavers process, we would hope would be on a much more shorter time scale. But I am in a way a stakeholder in that process, not the prime driver of it, because it has to be a sort of partnership with the transformation programme.
I've got a number of comments, but I won't hog. But Chair, if you don't mind, I do send my apologies. As I said, I'd need to actually go for personal matters now. I do apologise.
Thank you for your contribution, Ian, and I do hope we get on all right. It's a sad time.
Sorry, Lucy, did you want? Sorry, Lucy, did you need me?
Can you come in?
I did. I just wanted to get back to one of your points, is that the senior leadership team are cited to the management response. Okay. They did look at that. And I don't know if James is here as the executive director. Again, he will be overseeing the implementation of that work programme. But we obviously have put limited assurance, and we will be taking account of this within the annual governance, development of the annual governance, and obviously it's been aligned and linked to the risk. So the corporate leadership, the officer cohort, have been cited to the reports. I'm not sure if you were referring to the actual councillor executive or not. I'm
frankly, I'm just looking, Lucy, thank you for that. I think for me, what I'm looking at is the visibility on a regular basis of the flight plan, of the things that we're shutting down, the things that are going in, and the operational executive, so they know this one, because it needs to be articulated to the council about the level of risk that we're taking at a point in time. So, James, I apologise, I can't wait for your answer, sir, but I hope that makes sense. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Thank you.
It does, Ian. Thank you.
James, would you like to come in? Thank you again, John. James, yeah.
Just briefly, I mean, I won't repeat things that John has said, obviously. Yeah, these are complex problems, if you like, and they're problems that certainly corporate leadership team, portfolio holders, etc., are aware of. They're things that we are addressing partly through the transformation programme. The biggest concern, I guess, is around some old and out-of-date systems, and from an IT perspective, it's very easy just to turn those off. The problem with turning those off is that many of the services are reliant on them still, and so there are issues around how we can work with the businesses to get new systems in place, which goes through procurement processes, financial processes, etc. So fairly significant pieces of work, which is why we can't instantly flick a switch and get to the right answer for the council today. The other thing, which I'm genuinely not making excuses here, but the last 12 months has been about ensuring that the organisation works as effectively as possible from home, and that has been a huge workload, if you like, on IMT to make that happen. And I think a combination of John and his team and Circa worked their socks off, to be fair, to get us to a position where we moved 12 months ago. We would have 300 to 400 people working remotely, and all our systems would fall over. We're now in a position where over 4,000 on a daily basis are regularly working on this. That is in no way underestimating or undermining any of the issues that audit were raised. Absolutely not. And we have got plans in place to address those. But then many of these aren't quick fixes, and it's how we manage the risk during that transition.
Thank you, James, and we do fully appreciate everybody's hard work. And as you said, and as John made clear, we, this time last year, we even as members wouldn't have dreamed that we would have had every meeting on Teams and everything else. So the efforts that have gone into doing all this are absolutely immense and amazing, I have to say. So we do appreciate those. There's no doubt about that. But I say we just need to know where our weaknesses are and sort of what resources we need to put into those to, for you to be able to work through them in future. So, and I know Rob, has looked at this on the OSMB as well. So, it is something we know is very important to us, but we don't underestimate the complexities of fixing it by any stretch of the imagination, I'm sure. So, thank you very much.
No, Andrew, thank you, Chair. Sorry, Chair, thank you. Yeah. And both you and Councillor Parker through scrutiny as well for the sort of focus that it gives. And that's very helpful, actually, for a complex subject, which turns many people off, to be honest. So it's really helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again to John as well. Andrew.
Yes, apologies, James, if this appears churlish in the light of the miracle you've worked in the last 12 months. But on page 121, the fourth paragraph, which is about business continuity and disaster recovery, there's an audit opinion there which says the system is sound, but the implementation has not been carried out appropriately, and thus these issues potentially significantly increase the risk. And the background to that is watching Lucy Pledge about 5 years ago explain to a group of audit chairs in Lincolnshire that you'd had a major cyber attack and the consequences and the pain that result from that. So could you unpick that paragraph, please, on page 121? The system was sound, but it wasn't properly implemented. Has that been rectified?
John, are you in a position to refer? Can I defer to you on that, if you don't mind? Or
yeah, I'm struggling to find that paragraph, Councillor. Page 121 in the pack, you say, sir?
Yes. Page 121, John. It's on the lemon heading, and it says limited assurance at the top. And you've got ICT, network infrastructure, etc. Just the summary. Page 121. The pack is huge, I know.
Excuse me, John. What we do in our report is that we summarise in the sort of main and then reference the appendices. So what we've done on page 121 is summarise that report, but given the full details in Appendix 4, which would be outlined on pages 1, 4,
139 to 146 on the
yeah.
on the detail, and then 121 on the summary. I think so. Yeah.
Yes. So just to
139 to 50. That's it.
Yes, I can't see the paragraph on page 121, so I'm struggling to work out the context. Councillor Middleton, could I just ask you to repeat the sentence? And
right, the review identified that whilst the council has a good strategy in place for business continuity and disaster recovery, the development of the BC and DR plans for IMT and their testing has not been appropriately implemented. These issues significantly increase the risk for the council.
Thank you for that, sir. Yes, it's talking about the best practice of an organisation with classical technical infrastructure performing business continuity tests, typically of a kind where you might swing between, say, an east and west data centre, moving all the operating loads to a different part of the country to prove that that worked. Now, the point that the auditors acknowledge, before getting into to this sort of efficacy of that and the cost and complexity of doing it, is they do acknowledge later in the audit report that, however, you know, that strategy is of limited value time-wise, because as we migrate our operating loads into Microsoft Azure, the nature of that test would be very fundamentally different, very fundamentally less disruptive to the organisation, and dramatically less expensive. So I guess what they're saying is, whilst we think you should have done this in the past, we sort of recognise why you wouldn't do it now, because over the coming year it will be so fundamentally different, and the investment in terms of resource and treasure to do those kinds of tests and the risk of doing them is very significant. And we sort of accept that finding. Historically, best practice would have been to perform a test of that kind. However, it's a very risky business mitigating risk in IMT, and those tests, if you're starting from a greenfield site and you build a set of technologies and you constantly test this ability to stand up the services somewhere else, that is what the auditors would look for. That is the best practice, and that's the template of a great IMT service. Where that isn't your history, getting the first test delivered incorporates many failed runs, recovery work to get the organisation working again, and would create many hours of downtime whilst we learn all the lessons to get that first effective test performed. Thereafter, it's only worth doing if you then perform that every quarter, because every project you deliver, every technical change you make to the environment creates risk that the second time you run it, it won't work the same way. So, in fact, anecdotally, I don't mind sharing with you, I once was contracted to a major bank for 3 weeks to do exactly this. 9 months later and 5 million quid later, we performed a successful test after 5 failed attempts. And the cumulative downtime of those 9 months was greater than they had experienced in the previous 11 years. So the business decision had been not to do it, but the underwriters, their insurance underwriters, eventually insisted, and that was the outcome of that. So, does that give you the sort of context, Councillor?
It does indeed. It's clearly way above my brain power to understand that, but it sounds extremely plausible. Lucy's put a comment in the chat box to say they will be following up on that, and there is detail on page 148. So thank you, Lucy, for that.
And thank you, Andrew. And James also referred to the comments at the bottom of page 150 as well, with regards to the major systems testing. And let's say in an ideal world, we would just start again. Perhaps like you said, we're not in that luxury of having a system that's new and and hasn't been. I mean, I take it. I'm looking at John here again. I think our system is developed over many years and has got add-ons all over the place, which is as like many other larger organisations, particularly in the public sector, particularly at our sort of level would have. I think we've just got a lot of legacy systems that we just can't drop just like that because of the cost and the organisational capacity and the fact that you've got to keep your boils, you've got to keep everything in the air and working at the same time as changing it.
And let me repeat the truth that you have articulated, Chair. If ever you wanted an unexpected business continuity challenge, COVID has been it, and the show has been kept on the road. And I'm not aware that hordes of people have lost service that they could reasonably expect because of this. So there's a big tick for the IM&T team in that respect.
Thank you, Andrew. And James, you'd like to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say, the more that we move in the direction of Office 365 as an example, but standardised Microsoft type products that are accessed via the cloud through the internet, the more we remove some of these historic issues over time. Again, we can't just flick a switch and turn everything off and turn the new stuff on, but the more we move to that, and the less we try and customize our IT and make it specific to us, and that's when we have real issues where we end up with, at times, almost single points of failure around how we can maintain systems and things like that. So the more that we have that standardized approach, that corporate approach across the organization, the less concern, still concern, don't get me wrong, but there's less concern then around how we configure that and how we can make that work effectively in the future.
Thank you, James. Any further questions for John or James, please? A hand up. No. Hand up. Cheryl, have we got any further questions?
No, Chairman.
Well, thank you once again to John and James. And we've, so it's a challenging area, and it's one we'll no doubt be challenging for some time to come. But I think we know what the challenges are, and we have to build those into our risk profile as well. So thank you, gentlemen. And if we could then have got, and with no further questions or comments from the members of the Audit Committee, if I could propose that the outcomes of the internal audit report here be noted, and we have had an in-depth discussion of lots of the issues surrounding the paper. So can I have your agreement that I confirm that this report is noted? You're all happy? Thank you very much. Thank you. So if we could then move to item 9, and which is the risk management progress report, pages 153 to 174. I'll say hello to Debbie. Hi, Debbie.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to present the committee with the risk management progress report and take it as read, but I just want to highlight the key messages. As explained on page 157 of the progress report, the key activity over the last few months has been to maintain reporting to corporate leadership team, together with progress on the governance review. An update of where we are at with respect to the implementation of the review can be found in the Risk and Safety Governance Action Plan on pages 163 to 167. With respect to the strategic risks on page 158 of the progress report, there continues to be a level of assurance over the risks. On pages 169 to 173, you will note the detail of the strategic risks in the form of the risk register. Majority of the risks are unaltered. However, risk 3, resilience, business continuity, has gone from a low amber risk to a high amber risk, which reflects the possible risk around concurrent events. We continue to liaise with managers, heads of services and executive directors to gain assurances that the risks are being managed. On page 159, and looking forward, we have a number of areas that we are looking to implement and work on over the coming months, and we shall continue to provide an update of activities within our next report in September. Overall, the Council's strategic risks continue to be managed proactively. There is a good level of awareness of the current and emerging issues, with positive action being taken where appropriate. Our recommendation is that the committee notes the current state of the strategic risks facing the council and make recommendations on any further scrutiny required. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Andrew, thank you.
On page 158, Debbie, you only give limited assurance around market supply for adult care.
Yeah.
We know, because Glenn Garrett has told us every time he sees us, that it's extremely difficult to keep the team staffed.
That's correct.
Yeah, when Morrison's puts the hourly rate up by £1, then all the care staff disappear, etc. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people who are displaced from hospitality and other COVID-affected roles. Is this a golden opportunity to reiterate the offer, the reward, the satisfaction, albeit not wonderful pay, of being an adult carer? And could something be done about a specific recruitment drive? Because given that the core skills are interpersonal relationships, people who've worked in shops and hospitality will have those, but they would just need some dedicated training on being a carer. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, from a personal point of view, I've seen a lot of advertisements on the television around adult care. So that's one way of marketing it. Part of the remit for the Strategic Risk Register is the recruitment risk. And I've spoken to Fiona Thompson, and they are recruiting in high risk areas, which adult care and social work is one of them. So I think we are trying to capitalise as a one council, as a whole, that, you know, we are a great place to work. So I'm confident that we're doing everything we can with, you know, marketing, adverts, marketing on our website, things like that. So I think we are doing as much as we can at the moment. But I think with the COVID, it has been difficult. From what they're saying, a lot of people aren't wanting to jump ship at the moment because it's so uncertainty. But maybe in the next 12 months, we might see more people in the people that you've mentioned in the hospitality trade, etc.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie.
It's okay.
I think just picking up from what Andrew said on the other broader issue of market supply is the care providers themselves. I mean, clearly, and Michelle has reiterated this to us on numerous occasions, I think, Lucy, when we've been, and Debbie, when we've been discussing this topic, when Glenn has been with us, that we have tried as a county our very best to support the independent care homes who might have been experiencing some difficulties, well, certainly, you know, sort of cost pressures and everything else initially. So we've tried to support them as much as we can, but clearly there's a lot of pressure even on the multiple home providers as well. And I think some of those are going to be struggling equally. And what we don't want is to some of them to go into liquidation or something, and the whole provision be constrained as a consequence of that. So, Lucy, do you want to come in there into it?
Just to clarify that obviously Debbie and the service role is around coordinating the information for you. So the risk owner is Glenn Garrett. He's more appropriate to respond to direct questions around the mitigating actions, and just to give that insight is that we don't directly employ a lot of carers, so it's not about actually working for the council. It is around, as you say, Chairman, supporting the market, and there has been a lot of support through the caring forums to support the market and make it more attractive. So I think what we can do is just ask for a brief note from the risk owner just to see what is being done. I know things have been done, but we won't be cited to all the good work and everything that's been undertaken because we're not part of that adult care service. We do meet with the risk owners and pull together a high level report for you, but those kind of things are best provided to you directly from the risk owner.
That's a very fair response. I'm impressed how much you and Debbie know about the subject, notwithstanding the fact it's splendid.
I know it is a bit scary, but that's what heads of audit and risk do, is trying to keep your figures on the post. But there you go.
Well, thank you for that, everyone. Do I have any further questions for Debbie? Obviously, we've touched on the cybersecurity through detailed questions to John and James on sort of operational, slightly more operational perspective on the previous paper, and we all know how important that is, given all the constraints and that we were well aware of. So, do I have any further questions for Debbie on the risk issues that she's identified in this report? No. Okay. Obviously, we've got the just to reiterate to everyone that the risk register on our boxes is actually given to us on the appendices to the report, which is very informative as well. Do you have any comments on those, Debbie, on pages 169 onwards, which you are where we are in terms of our risk scores? I think looking at these, we are where we probably have predicted.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. It's quite static. I mean, that there's been the only main scoring that's changed, that's moved up at sort of like, as I mentioned, a high amber, which is, it's gone from a low amber to a high amber, is the business continuity one, and that just is the horizon scanning that we do about concurrent events. So it is recognised, not so much now as we're coming into the spring, but certainly over the winter, it was seen that the same members of staff were seen to be helping with the emergencies. So if we got a snow, we got flood, we got, the COVID, we got a lot of number of events all at the same time, this could push it up to a red risk. I like to say that we're not going to get snow now, but who knows? So it just recognises that it just felt that it was a high amber rather than a low amber. But everything else was pretty static in response to the scores and the assurance levels that I've provided.
That's great, Debbie. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I'm looking to my colleagues. Rob would like to ask a question.
Yeah, it's a question in relation to page 158, and it's about limited assurance, and it's to do with safeguarding children, and it's to do with the assessment that although it remains at high risk and limited assurance due to the ongoing impact of COVID, this will be reduced once COVID restrictions are lessened. There's a lot of discussion within what we might call the caring welfare sector that the problems will not go away immediately because of the recognition that some of the things that may have happened during the period of COVID then will come to the surface. Wondered what the professional view is that we can clearly expect the high risk and limited assurance currently to be reduced.
I think that on this particular one, the actual controls around this are very much KPI based. So it's around immunisations, reaching a certain level. It's about registering with GPs, dentists, things like that. And the key element for this particular one was not being able to get into schools, so not being able to do the immunisations. The doctors only seeing certain patients, the dentists not seeing so many people. So they're not actually reaching them KPIs, and that's why it was limited and high assurance. I think you're quite right in saying that it's not going to be fixed overnight, but this as you're probably aware, this risk was quite a low risk, and it was always substantial and improving because of the risk around safeguarding of children was very well managed. Like I say, with us moving towards the existing controls about more KPIs, we can actually be measurable, and they're not reaching them because of the issues I've just mentioned. So that's why it is that. But I do appreciate that maybe I'm, rose-tinted glasses, thinking that in September I'll be able to provide you with a substantial and a lower risk. I can't guarantee that. But hopefully with the schools opening and the doctors, surgeons and the dentists, they'll be more positive.
Okay. We'll come back.
Thank you, Lucy. Please, Lucy.
just again, obviously the risk owner is Heather Sandy. So as the question's been raised by Councillor Parker, we can ask Heather to come back and give some direct assurance as the owner on the movement in September or the November meeting, if that's appropriate for the committee, as it's a limited assurance area.
Yeah, I think perhaps both Glenn and Heather, Lucy, would be a good idea to get an update of how we're getting on, but when hopefully the vaccination programme has kicked in a bit more and we can return to some sort of normality, and use the word some advisedly. Okay.
Sorry, could
Andrew, Rob,
I'm not just talking about vaccinations. I'm not talking about.
I know.
Sorry, it's not the physical. Well, it could be, because it could be child abuse. About child protection and safeguarding children. That's my point.
Yeah. I understood that, so I'll make sure that, as I say, you'll have the risk owner present at the committee, so you can ask the accountable officer what actions, because although Debbie has the high level, they'll be able to respond more cited to what the controls and the differences directly, because they manage that service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Andrew?
Well, it's the same theme as Councillor Parker. I can report to you from the world of the NHS that there is growing evidence of low-level mental health issues with school-aged children, which cannot be quantified at the moment, but will start to emerge. And of course, the importance of tackling these early on is that it don't become psychotic experiences somewhere down the line, and a child with self-harming issues, etc., will often be an adult mental health patient. So it would be useful, I think, to be able to meet the responsible officer for this area to assure us that it was all a bit of professional hype, maybe. That might be one possibility. Alternatively, there might be some deep-seated mental health concerns which will warrant some activity. And in that context, I'm aware of a couple of areas where a role of youth wellbeing advisor is being created to reach into schools, to support schools with the sort of anxieties that teenagers have, to try and stop them becoming more serious than just a teenage tension or anxiety. But it's a subject we can pick up when we see the responsible officer.
Thank you, Andrew. Do we have any further questions from members? If not, I will pose that the current status of risk space in the council, we note those, and we have said about the attendance of the children's services and director and adult social care director at the September meeting would be most welcome. So if everyone is in agreement, I will confirm that the report is noted. If we can turn to item 10, which is the international standards on accounting and our management response. Lucy.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is linked to the previous papers presented by External Audit and the Finance Sue around the statements and production of the statements. Each year, the Council, the External Auditors asked the Council to make representations under the international standards of auditing around the risk of material misstatements due to error and fraud. So the report sets out management's assessment. Our team has coordinated that through the leadership team. It's been signed off by the corporate leadership team, and also the resources leadership team had a sounding board to make sure it gave a fair and accurate representation of the management arrangements. So it is quite a prescriptive self-assessment provided by the external auditors. We've also noted the materiality statements of the accounts for the is quite high. It's obviously 22.8 million for the council and 22.2 million for the pension fund. We obviously have acknowledged where there's inherent fraud risks. but we also state that basically our internal control systems to manage and reduce this risk are sound, with our fraud risk register and our counter fraud team and the audit committee playing a role in that. And they have also been updated to reflect the new fraud risk around COVID. So overall, the assessment of there being a material misstatement due to fraud or error has been assessed as low, and the appendices has specifically responded to the questions raised by the external auditor as part of their preliminary work on the accounts. So hopefully it doesn't give you anything that you know there's no surprises in there, because you play a key role and you've seen a similar kind of report last year. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Lucy. Questions to Lucy, please? Questions to Lucy. Again, it's the usual self-assessment format that we've seen before. And I think, from my point of view, I can't see anything very controversial on that. Are members happy with that? Yes. Yes. So I would propose again that that this would accurately reflect the management process to minimise the risk of fraud and error in the County Council and in the pension fund. And I will confirm the report is noted if you're all in agreement. Thank you. So we can then move to item 11, which was the Counter Fraud Plan 21-22. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report sets out the statement of intent for our proactive and responsive counter fraud work for 21-22. As previously discussed, the council has a dedicated team. It is a small team. It equates to 5 full-time equivalent people to fight the fraud within the council. Our processes and our systems and our focus are all aligned to the CIPFA Code of Practice, which sets out 5 principles around acknowledging our responsibility through our process and culture, identifying the risks, the strategy, and providing more resources to take action against those risks. So we have set out in the report more detailed areas of focus, but we prioritised in general, in summary, our resources to deliver a continued good practice around fraud prevention and detection, to respond to the higher risks identified in the fraud risk register, where we can sort of focus our proactive counter fraud work. We also lead and support the Lincolnshire Counter Fraud Partnership across public sector bodies, which tackling cross-cutting themes, and we also react to any more emerging fraud risks. We also have to address any fraud investigations where we seek redress and recovery as appropriate. So we do have 745 days in the plan, and it does actually incorporate some contingency to allow greater flexibility to respond to any larger scale investigations and emerging risks. So I'm happy to take any questions on the detailed content.
Thank you, Lucy. Any questions, members, Lucy? We have covered some of this already before. On who's focus it from?
Yeah, it's a very strategic document. This is. It looks at the process, CIPFA Code of Practice, for example, the nature of the work. In relation to what actually is going to be looked at, this year, current year, marks a difference in the sense of COVID, and not just COVID as we know it in a general sense, but in a specific sense, because the County Council has allocated quite a chunk of money right to aid small businesses. I'm just interested in to what extent that opens up, when I say a new opportunity, I don't mean it in that crude sense, but what I'm saying is that this is new to our way of working in the sense of distributing public funds. And I just welcome any comments on what practices will be put into place.
Okay, so as part of the development of that policy and any new sort of the business grants, for example, we worked very closely with the operational officers and finance to take as much appropriate due diligence around preventative fraud indicators. So we did and pulled together the policy, the application process. So we worked very closely with the officers to fraud proof as much as we could, any processes, including that one. And then we're also supporting the service to look at applications. So we're circling back and looking at assurance around what's coming through applications. So Andrew, the executive director, were very keen to make sure that the council took every steps it could to protect the public purse, and those checks and balances are actually working. So it is filtering out any sort of unreliable applications through that process. So we are involved at the front of the process to make sure the systems are designed to fraud proof. We are then also helped to work through the checking process on this particular area because it was deemed to be a high fraud risk on that particular one. And then on the COVID generally, finance again have been very involved with ourselves to design sound due diligence and fraud proofing around distributing the grants, but also they needed to be pragmatic and proportionate, so the money's got to the people when they needed them at the time they needed them. So there's been an acceptance that there will be some circling back to look at the processes and doing some fraud assurance work post payment. So that's included in our work plan going forward. And the government's expecting some of those things to happen retrospectively. So it was balancing that sort of getting the money out, but also protecting the council's public purse. I don't know whether Andrew wanted to add anything.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Yeah, Lucy has covered it, particularly on the business grants, Councillor Parker. It's a fair comment to raise. Yeah, we've put in a hell of a lot of work around. I'd love to see what the time and motion bill is at the end of this in terms of the support that particularly my two functions have put in terms of the fraud and the finance team around. The wrap around that, but massively alive to the challenges that such schemes pose. Indeed, there's always something in the press about those sort of schemes anyway, and that's why we were very alive to it. And so Lucy's given a good account of what we've put into place there. But it's a fair question to raise.
Thanks. I mean, if we took an example of 1%, then out of a £12 million budget, we're talking about £120,000. So it's right that we put in staff time to that, because that's a significant amount of money. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that the particular fund is likely to attract any different approach. So yes, I think it's protecting public funds is something that we need to make clear that we're doing, as well as paying out rightly the amount of money that we are doing to help small businesses.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Andrew and Lucy. Have we got any further comments, members, or questions to the officers on the counter fraud plan, please? Okay, well, thank you. Well, I'm going to propose that the counter fraud plan for 21-22 be approved, and I'll just look for a seconder, please. Seconder?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. Members, put the cameras on and raise your hands if in the first instance you approve. Thank you. Over to you, Chairman.
I'm just waiting for Councillor Coupland if he's still with us. No. Okay, that's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, that's good. Move on to item 12, the work plan. Lucy.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is just aims to give you a forward look. So it's we've tried to sort of rejig the plan so that it's spread over particularly the June and July committees because they're very busy. As you can see, we've included the item that was suggested at the last meeting around horizon scanning. So I shall be bringing something for the committee to have a look at that at the June meeting. I propose to engage with the senior leadership team or the corporate leadership team to get their insights. And again, that will help inform your work plan going forward. So I suppose only picking up on Councillor Parker's comment going forward around training, as we design, if the members could maybe reflect on what they found most useful, or what they would have found most useful in terms of training and content as a new member, if they could give us some insight of any thoughts of what they would, if they put themselves in the shoes of a new member, what would be most helpful for them to get a feel of the work and the content of the audit committee. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I would welcome some feedback on the training programme.
Would you like that by email, Lucy?
And whatever you deem is most appropriate. I'm conscious of the time, so email would be good.
Sure, email's good, and then people can have their time to reflect. If that's okay with everyone.
And then,
Mark,
I only want to say one thing, and it's linked to training. I think that if I was looking at this as a brand new member of the audit committee, even though I'd had perhaps half a day's training, the idea of having 8 items on the agenda, to my mind, would be quite off-putting, simply because I think that the one thing that can help new members most of all is time by explanation for our officers, in the sense of a slow approach. I'm not saying that we go too quickly at the moment, but if we want to get people on board, then I think that a slow pace with opportunity for questions is important. And I just wonder whether or not any of these 8 items that we've got at the moment could be deferred in order to have a gentler pace by way of introduction.
I think the trouble is we've been doing that a bit.
I think
Lucy can look at that for you, Rob. Yeah.
We can. I suppose it's just whether you would like maybe another meeting in the diary, because that's the thing is,
idea, because
because it's all concentrating.
When we've got July, haven't we?
In September, you see, but we can have a look for you, Councillor Parker. I think you're right. We tried to shift things.
Okay. All right, Andrew.
Thank you. I've got a substantive question, but a comment on Councillor Parker's good point. I've just inducted somebody to a health service committee when they were completely novice and completely without any knowledge. They found it very beneficial to observe and then to be budded by me, and we did have chats between meetings to explore the things that he didn't feel he wanted to ask in an open committee, but he was prepared to ask me in private. So that's a process. No, it's the forward plan, Lucy. Councillor Parker's intrigued me with his comment on the 2 road schemes and the cost overruns. Obviously, my question is, was the control environment appropriate for those contracts, or is there need to review those, to do an internal audit on those projects to see if there's any control environment lesson that needs to be learned?
We have done some work on some of those major capital schemes, and the council has strengthened their approach. But I've asked Matt to incorporate capital contracts in the new plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, so that sort of members, are we happy to note the work plan with the comments we've made? Are we happy with that? The formal vote. So I'll propose the work plan is noted on. I think we're all in agreement with that by lots of things. So I think that concludes the formal part of the meeting, but clearly we have the PSA report just to have a look at it across a minute or two.
Chairman, now that